Welcome back to Heal, a podcast for Change by Fire, healing, empowering, accepting, and living. I'm Julie Piccone, founder of Change by Fire and the Arizona Walk of Courage, and I am one of your hosts.
And my name is Lori Janik, and I'm a 15-year burn advocate and social worker and current trauma grief therapist. So come join us today. We're going to again dive further into alternative modalities of healing and really talk further about connecting and harnessing that power of the mind and different levels of being. Let's get healing.
So last episode, we were working alongside of one of our yoga therapists, and we were learning a lot about yoga. And there was 5 principles related to yoga. So there was the physical poses, I think it's asanas.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then we got our breathing poses, which is the pranayamas, nutrition, diet, relaxation. There was meditation and positive thinking. So when it came to the yoga, it was kind of a full body, whole body healing. It wasn't just with the mind, it was also with the body, as well as burn scar support to really help when it comes to flexibility, mobility, mental realignment. And our yoga therapist shared a takeaway tool. And on that takeaway tool, she really shared about meditative breath and the pause. And so, Lori, have you had an opportunity to practice that meditative breath and pause?
I actually do. That is a regular reminder for me, both the session and her kind of integration of that. But that's something I try to genuinely do at the start of every day, is start my day with just some mindfulness, some meditation, a little bit of pause. And in the therapy realm of my work as well too, I have little spaces of time in between each client. So I'm like, oh, this is such a powerful place and space to place those, as well as in starting some sessions. And that's also been something really, as far as with my kids, that I've really been trying to practice, is how can we take a pause and just notice when things happen before we go to those reaction or reactive responses. So
I would agree. I would also say for me personally, kind of like you have a big, busy job, you're going. And so for me, I'm on the phone one after another. And oftentimes I can find myself getting a little anxious, overwhelmed because I'm not taking that pause.
mm-hmm.
I'm not recentering myself, taking a couple deep breaths, pausing, reflecting before I jump into the next one. And so it's been very important for me as well, just to have that moment, even when I get somewhere, to just sit in the car for a moment, breathe, let it out, and really just start, allowing everything to work out the way it's supposed to. So it's been very important for me too. So I love that she shared that with us. So hopefully our listeners have also taken advantage of that. And if you haven't, now you can.
And today we're further going to expand on just that navigation of how further can we get back into that brain and body connection, really delve a little bit deeper in kind of brain body work and explore another modality of healing, hypnotherapy.
My favorite.
Julie, what can you share with us, since we usually start off with a little bit of definition work around our therapy modalities? What exactly is hypnotherapy?
Well, hypnotherapy is a heightened state of concentration and focus. So you're really focusing your attention. It's found in the subconscious, and this is the part of our mind that is outside of our typical day to day. So it's kind of like the one that just goes without really thinking about it. It's kind of our programming. And so it's a type of mind-body medicine, one of my favorites. And a trained and certified hypnotherapist can guide you into this deep state of focus, utilizing gentle cues, repetition, imagery, and this level of intense concentration and focus supports the ability for the mind and the body to be more open to suggestions. And, it kind of helps us to kind of guide that individual to improve overall health, habits. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about this today.
That sounds amazing. Have you had any direct experiences with hypnotherapy yourself, Julie?
Yes, I have. I love hypnotherapy. So I'll tell you a little story. So back shortly after my mom passed away, well, let me back up actually. So in high school, I there was a class, it was a psychology class, and I thought, "Ooh, I want to take that class. It sounds really interesting." And during that class, I'll never forget, our teacher brought a hypnotherapist in.
Hmm.
And they said, "Hey, anybody here want to get hypnotized?" And I raised my hand. And looking back, I can't even believe I did that. But I ended up getting hypnotized in front of the whole class. And I went home that day and told my mom, "I'm going to school for psychology." That was amazing. And I did. I got a psychology degree. And so fast forward, I had been hypnotized a few different times and really enjoyed the experience and how relaxing it was. And so after my mom had passed away, I was really focused on creating change by fire, looking at different
Mhm.
healing modalities. And hypnotherapy was one that was really important to me and that I had really received huge benefits from. And so instead of just, being a participant, I actually went to a school out in Tempe, which is the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts,
Mhm.
where I met our guest today and did 200 hours of hypnotherapy training.
Woo!
So my children got to take part in many of those exercises because it was, hey, I need to, practice. So
Mhm.
go sit in that nice chair and I'm going to hypnotize you. And they loved it. So I have quite a bit of experience. I don't utilize it as like a profession. I don't personally do hypnotherapy, but I have it and I have the knowledge behind it. And I just cannot speak enough great things about it. How about you?
Mine is probably gonna be definitely on the lesser realm than you, but I do feel it's important kind of me sharing my experience with it because
Yeah.
it may align with some people that have had more of not so great an experience. So I'm gonna preface that. I was a teenager, and I was going through treatment for a pretty severe eating disorder and some mental health issues. And my therapist at the time utilized hypnotherapy on me, and I just did not remember it going well. And there was a lot of discord that was created in that therapeutic
Mm,
relationship. And so I will admit that, like, it was something that I just didn't think of for quite some time in my further kind of life development healing work. But I remember when I went back to school for my graduate program, it was kind of a therapy modality that we discussed. And within recent years of my counseling endeavors, that's where I've said it's more like, I'm going to give some of these things a second chance because we all know when we're teenagers, sometimes we don't broach everything with the greatest level of acceptance and excitement. So, definitely, I'm a big proponent of anything that really kind of utilizes the whole body, like the deep recess of, within you, within your body, within your mind to really kind of connect, gauge, and understand yourself. So, I have more recently actually undergone that through one of my therapeutic colleagues and had a much better experience than previously. So, there's also that.
well, that's awesome.
Well, like you mentioned, Julie, we have an amazing guest here with us today, life coach and certified hypnotherapist, Linda Bennett. And she's going to further share and expand on hypnotherapy practices, benefits, supports, and whole body healing. And I know you learned hypnotherapy through Linda.
Yes. Well, I just adore Linda. I was telling Lori before we got started how much I adore you and how when I started with Southwest Institute of Healing Arts and did a hypnotherapy program, I was so drawn to you. You have just such a calming presence and the way you explain things. And I thought, what you do is just so cool. And obviously, you helped me learn a lot. And you were around since really the beginning of Change by Fire. I mean, Change by Fire was like a vision. Like it wasn't even like fully in, I don't even think it was an
It was a
organization
thought.
yet. It was a thought. And so that was really the first healing modality that was like, okay, like let's start looking at hypnotherapy because I
Mm.
knew the impact, I knew the benefits it could have for burn survivors. And so I got to know you over that period of time. I want to say it was probably about 18 months of doing the hypnotherapy, going through the
Mm.
classes, and just learned so much. I definitely think during that point in time, I was going through the grief journey and I was
Mhm.
probably a little dysregulated. And I think to myself, I'd like to go back and redo some of those classes. Now that I'm a little more in my body and
Yeah.
not, going through that. And so, we are so excited to have you on our podcast today to learn more about hypnotherapy, kind of how you got started. some different resources and supports on how hypnotherapy can really work with our burn and trauma survivors. And our first question for you is, what initially drew you to hypnotherapy?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. And I love to talk about hypnotherapy because this is my jam, my passion. I got started because my life was falling apart.
Hmm.
I was going through a divorce. I was going through a bankruptcy of a business. It was like, ugh. And someone suggested I give it a try. And I went, okay, I don't know much about it. So sure, I'll give it a try. And it was so impactful, the first session, that I became a student 2 years after that. And that's been my life ever since.
Wow. Well, and you're also known as the Hypno Queen, is that right?
Yeah.
She's definitely the Hypno Queen. We'd be in class and she's like, "All right, everyone, close your eyes." We're like, "Oh no, where are we going?" And it was so much fun because she taught hypnotherapy in such a great way. And I've had many sessions with her, after I was a student. I've had family members go see her, and her approach is just very welcoming and calming, and just safe. Obviously, when you were a teenager, you didn't have a great experience. And so it doesn't feel very safe. And even still, after I've had so many hypnotherapy sessions, because as students, we would go through practices, I still get a little nervous. But I also think it's not just nervousness. I think it's excitement
Mhm.
of like, okay, what is going to come? Like, what's going to come up? What am I going to work through?
Right.
And so I'm definitely due for a hypnotherapy session with Linda. So when you obviously you had your experience where you had it was so impactful. Were there things that were specifically that you think of that were impactful for you? Did it help you with like a different mindset? What was
Yeah,
it
I
like?
think the key thing for me is it gave me hope. And
Hmm.
I was in a place that hope wasn't even on my radar. And it didn't fix everything right away, but it gave me the drive and the motivation to take the action I needed to take that I wasn't taking.
Mm.
And it's like there's light at the end of this tunnel, that it could get better. But I knew it was going to be up to me. But it's still, and my very first session, I have to, when I look back on it now, they were addressing low self-esteem. Well, who doesn't have low self-esteem? That just comes with the territory, right? And so they said, start clearing that away. And I'm thinking in my mind, okay, how am I supposed to do this? And the first thing I saw it was like having a dream. I saw kids getting off a school bus, and I had a checklist and I was checking them off. I had no idea who they were. The next thing I'm doing is punting footballs. Now, trust me, punting footballs was not a normal activity for me, but I was punting a football going, "You're out of here." And I have no idea who out of here was or what it was, but my life changed. And I was like, okay, I don't totally, completely understand what just happened, but I feel better. That was the kicker for me, is I felt better about myself and what was going on in my life, and that I could do something about it. That was worth it. That was worth it right there.
I love that.
Well, that sounds like that really was your piece of tangible as well too, because I think that at least, I mean, if I reflect back to like when I was a teenager and my experience, what maybe might be some people's like concerns is, well, I don't know if I want to lose control, and I like, what does letting go mean? And like, it's not like a tangible concept. So how would you describe your work with individuals and promote this field of healing amidst like maybe that kind of fear that we have to kind
Right.
of let go or
Here's the thing. When somebody is in resistance to let go, I always want to know, well, how does it help you to hang on to this, whatever this is?
mm,
And for a lot of people, they can't even tell you. They're going, well, I don't know, but it just doesn't feel safe to let go. So they don't feel safe. So I've got to do something to make it safe for them. And what a lot of people think hypnosis isn't two entirely different things. It's not about trying to control you. It's about giving you the control back to do what you want to do. So it's not like I'm going to tell you to do this and then you're automatically going to do it. You're going to say, heck no, I don't want to do that. And if a client isn't ready to make the changes that they need to make, you can't force them. And I have had plenty of people over the years say, would you hypnotize my son, my whoever, to quit doing this or quit doing that? And it's like, especially, I worked in recovery for a number of years, and that comes up a lot. Can you get them to stop doing whatever they're doing? No, I can't get them to stop, but do they want to, I can support them in that. And I think that's a big, big difference.
Because it sounds like then you're really working with their willingness, their readiness to change. So it's
Right.
really control is in your court or in their court versus in your court.
Right, exactly. And not everybody's willing to change yet, because
True.
they're getting something out of whatever they're doing. Even if it seems like the unhealthiest behavior in the world, they're getting something out of it. And so we've got to find, and so a lot of it is exploration and finding out what it is that keeps them in this pattern. And for a lot of people, it's a sense of control over their environment that may be chaotic. For some people, it's just the change, especially, and I'll liken this again to people that have substance problems, even smoking cessation. A lot of people smoke, and they'll say, oh yeah, I want to quit. I'll quit any day, but I just don't want to. Well, what's it doing for you? And when they can answer that question, and in a lot of cases, like smoking cessation, it's their best friend. So of course they don't want to part with that because it brings them some sort of comfort. And so part of my job is also to find a way to replace that comfort with something that's much healthier. So it's never about forcing anybody.
Well, and I think that's an important factor for people to hear, what it's not about versus what people think or maybe thought that it was about. With hypnosis, like, what are the common things that you utilize hypnosis for, and can you coordinate it with other treatments?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, I see a lot of people that are struggling with stress. Stress isn't going to go away. It is, but it's our response to the stress.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of self-esteem issues. I do some medical work, and we have had a project with one of the hospitals here in town where we've done some work with the patients with great success rates. It's not my specialty, but it's definitely one of those areas I work in. I would say self-esteem is probably the biggest issue. And quite frankly, I find that if people don't feel good about themselves, the decisions they make usually aren't the best ones.
True story.
Yeah. Can you share with us a little bit about your work with those individuals that are maybe suffering with like post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety, depression, different life traumas? Obviously,
Sure.
Changed by Fire works alongside a lot of our burn survivors and those that were affected by the trauma.
Right. And I think, first of all, for me, this is for me. I'm not going to say every hypnotherapist, but this is what I do. For me, I want to look at what do they believe to be true about themselves because of the experience. And a lot of times there's an underlying story. I should have known better. I shouldn't have been there when this or whatever happened. I should have, could have, would have, all those kinds of things. And it's not about that. It's not about putting blame on anybody. It's letting go of what's the hold it has on you. And there's a lot of grief. I think there's a lot of grief that needs to be addressed from the beginning. Because there's a loss of innocence, there's a loss of trust and faith, there's all these losses that people experience in a traumatic event, and they don't know how to deal with it because we've got in our minds that everything should always be safe. It's a lovely thought, and it's not always there. So how do we maneuver them beyond that and know that they're going to be, we can't predict that they're going to be safe every moment of their lives. I mean, when I had, 2 strokes recently, and one in my car, there's no doubt about it. That was very traumatizing. So when I still haven't driven much, but I have a little bit, I got in the car and the first thought that crossed my mind is, what if I have another stroke while I'm driving? It took me right back to that moment, which was I was completely out of control. I couldn't manage the car. I drove over a bunch of rocks. Fortunately, I didn't hit anybody. But it's still that feeling. What if it happens again? And I have no way of predicting that. I don't want that to happen. I want to be a safe driver. I don't want to put anybody else in harm's way. So what can I do to strengthen myself from the inside out so I avoid getting myself in a situation where that could happen again?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the strategy I use in that situation.
Have you worked with individuals that have had anxiety and depression? Because it seems like, from my experience, a lot of the burn survivors I encounter, they have a lot of anxiety. They just don't feel safe within their body. They don't feel settled. They feel like this feeling of overwhelm. What would be like your approach on that? If somebody came to you for anxiety, what would that look like?
I want to look at what their beliefs are. What do they believe? I mean, what do they believe? Well, now I have these scars on my body, so therefore people are going to say this about me. Whatever it may be, I want to see what story they've got going internally that's impacting them. I can remember, oh gosh, this is a long, long time ago, but I lived in an apartment that caught on fire.
Oh,
Mm.
wow.
And it was, fortunately, it was not that big of a deal, not compared to what a lot of people have gone through. And we got beyond it. But still, there was a natural instinct. If I saw even a candle flame, it triggered me.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to know that those triggers are there. So what's the story I tell myself around that trigger? Okay, that's a candle and it's this big and I can manage that. So you break it down into baby steps that they can make and feel confident about and build their confidence from the inside. Then I think it makes a difference.
I would agree.
So it really sounds like a lot of, you're pulling out that negative cognition or that negative belief that's attached to whatever happened,
Right.
knowing how it affects their safety, and then helping
Mhm.
them find a return to a sense of safety or a sense of
Right.
kind of like, what do I want to say? Like a more positive cognition or positive belief about themselves.
Well, I think there's something to be said for that. And, you know, some people say that's like being Pollyanna. Do you remember the movie Pollyanna?
What year did that come out?
My
Okay, so a
parents,
long time ago. But anyway, so the whole
I-
thing with Pollyanna is her dad taught her the glad game. And every time something negative happened, she found something to be glad about. And that's where the Pollyanna label came from. And I think there's something to be said for that. And a lot of people say, well, but that's not reality. Okay, what reality do I want to live in? One that's always based on fear, or one that says there's hope out there?
Mhm.
That's a choice I'm making.
well, and it's also recognizing that there are like different sides of just about everything in life. So many of the therapy modalities that exist like nowadays, as well as just teaching people our brains are naturally negative leaning. So
Right.
if we see more negative stuff, that's what we're going to attract too. So if you
Right.
have to really teach and practice going to the more positive, the encouraging, the hope filled aspect to kind of create that sense of balance in life.
Well, and
Right.
we talk about gratitude journals. That's a practice I do every day.
Mhm.
Is
Right.
everything may not be perfect, and I can still find things to be grateful for.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. And it's kind of that all or nothing kind of thinking that people get
Mhm.
caught up in. And Julie, you know that I've written a lot of scripts, and that's one of the scripts I wrote was people get caught in all or nothing thinking. If it isn't this perfect little whatever, then it's this horrible thing over here. But there's a whole bunch in between.
Huh.
And helping people find that in between. It may not be perfect, but it's getting better.
Linda, can you walk us through like an idea of what hypnosis might look like?
Sure. So typically when one comes in for a session, there is a client intake. So we gather information as why the client's there, what do they want to achieve? And I want to make sure that I can realistically offer assistance to whoever's there across from me. I've had clients come in and say, I want you to fix me. I don't even know where to start. So I've got to make sure that I'm not encourage them in a way that would be easy for them to get disappointed. Again, baby steps. Let's start making baby steps and getting that confidence built. And then after we do the intake, then typically I explain more about hypnosis because a lot of people have a different opinion and an idea what they believe it is. And then the next thing is we start the hypnosis process. And that's where we do a deep relaxation. And you talked about what you're doing with yoga last week. It's breathing and relaxation. And when we're in that state, we're more open to a lot of things. And for some people, they liken it to the dream state. And your dreams are very, very powerful. I find that that's one of the areas that I really work with my clients on, is helping them recognize their dreams. And some people say, oh, I don't dream. Well, yeah, you do. You're just not remembering them, which is okay. Or some people have lots of nightmares. And I go, great. And they look at me like I just lost my mind. What do you mean great? Because I have nightmares. Because you're telling me what your fear is. And I've had clients, for example, I had a client who had a tough upbringing and was lots of abuse in the household and things like that. And she always had these dreams about somebody coming to attack her. So she'd had one of those dreams and she came in to see me and she goes, I had one of those dreams. I said, okay, good. Let's go over the dream again. Take me back to it. And her eyes get about this big and she's going, I don't want to do that. I said, trust me, it's going to be okay. So the attacker came into the dream. I said, stop right there, turn around and face the attacker and tell him to go away. That dream has never come back. So it just shows me that the more we're willing to take action and take accountability and make choices for our lives, that things don't have to stay the way they were.
I love to like how you likened really the dream and the nightmares and just, I mean, your brain and your body are trying to make sense of missing pieces of information, and
Right.
hypnosis can help people make sense of those missing pieces of information. Whereas I know like for me, and just the value of kind of getting in a relaxed and safe state, which was probably the reason why it didn't fully work when I was a teenager, because I couldn't get into a relaxed and safe state. But just the value of that as that kind of settling into and then allowing yourself to explore.
Well,
Right.
and through the relaxation process, we talk about that imagery, the repetition. There's a lot of that because as you're focusing on what she is saying, or any hypnotherapist, you're putting yourself into this trance and you're letting go. And so your body starts to feel very relaxed and heavy and calm.
So maybe we should phrase it more as kind of
I feel like I'm getting
relaxing
very relaxed and
rather
calm
than
right now
letting
just
go.
talking about it. Yeah. So, okay. So then after they get relaxed and they get calm and so forth, then what happens next?
So then typically I use some sort of script, some sort of metaphorical story that relates to what they're experiencing so they can connect with it. The subconscious mind's natural language is metaphors. We learn through stories. When we were kids, how many people read stories to us and we could put ourselves in the story and we would then be able to learn and understand about life and things through those stories. So that's what we're continuing on with. And those metaphors can be so powerful. And, it's the second time I experienced hypnosis, I will never forget this. I don't even remember what started it, but all of a sudden I felt like someone was grabbing onto my arms and it really hurt. And I was like, what's going on? And it took me back to experience with my mother. And she was yelling at me saying she hated me. And I was a little kid and I thought, well, if mom hates me, then the rest of the world hates me. Now, in this scenario, I was able to stand back and see what set this up. And my mother was a single parent, didn't have much. My grandfather had just built her this beautiful vanity. And my mother liked to sleep in on Sundays. So my brother and I got out her red nail polish and decided to paint her new furniture. So all of a sudden I could stand back and go, Well, I can see she was probably pretty upset about that, and all of a sudden, it changed my original thought about it, and it was like, well, of course she'd say that because she was upset, and I let her off the hook, I let me off the hook, it just changed the dynamics of that whole thing.
Yeah, it's like because you could see the context and that allowed you to
Yes,
really re-story the whole
right,
situation. I
right,
love that idea of interconnection or weaving in scripts and stories because that is so much how we learn, how we grow. I mean, that's the whole like reading, teaching of children. Any parent
right,
with children will tell you like that's how like my kid picked up on major concepts. And if you struggle with behaviors and different things, you often utilize stories and
Mhm.
right,
metaphors to help better understand and engage.
Well, and, like Linda said, she's written many, many different stories, not only for, adults, but even for children that are going through hypnotherapy as well. So it's not like it just could be an adult that's taking advantage of it. Usually children tend to be more receptive because, we as older individuals, it's like, well, what's going to happen? And we also hear, these misperceptions about hypnotherapy. You can make me cluck like a chicken. What if I don't wake up? What are some of the other, misperceptions you hear from
those are
people that
probably the
come in?
2 biggest, and when clients say to me, "Are you gonna make me cluck like a chicken?" I always say, "Well, if you'd like to, I'll be happy to help you." But and there's this again, they think they're not gonna remember their experience, and they're gonna remember it in bits and pieces like they do with their dreams.
Mhm.
They're, afraid they're gonna lose control, and I'm gonna make them do something. I have I have no interest in making anybody do anything, and B, you're still that much in control that if you don't wanna do it, you're gonna say, "Nope, not going there."
Yeah.
So those are the most
Uh,
common ones.
yeah. Well, I have really enjoyed having you on our podcast, like learning just about hypnotherapy. Obviously, for our listeners, I had my own understanding of it. And, obviously, you had your experience too, Lori. And, just the power of the mind and the body to really utilize hypnotherapy as a tool in our healing. And obviously,
Right.
there's still so much to be learned about hypnotherapy. But Lori, you always like your takeaway tool.
That's my favorite what well, I shouldn't say that's my favorite thing about our podcast. There's a lot of favorite things I have, but that's one of my more favorite things is every podcast episode we end with a type of takeaway tool. And that's really just an added additional learning technique or modality, little glimmer of wisdom that can really support our listeners and just, you know, grasping onto new concepts and living, a better, fuller, richer life. And as so, Linda, do you have any that you might like to share with us from your work as a life coach, as a hypnotherapist, a tool maybe that really could help people support in just accessing these powers of their mind, of their inner consciousness.
Sure. I do, and so I've sent Julie already an MP3 recording of a script I recorded, it's called The Waterfall,
Mm.
and the idea is it gets you very relaxed, and then you go into a waterfall and let the waterfall wash away whatever the troubles are,
Oh, that's a
and most people
beautiful
can
metaphor.
relate to that imagery pretty easily because I reinforce it by suggesting every time you get into the shower, let the shower wash away any negativity.
I
I've done
like
that with
it.
Linda before, but I didn't remember that. And every time I get in the shower, I'm always like, wash away anything that's bothering me, anything that's causing me anxiousness and so forth. And I remember there was one that I did with you years ago, and it was around a
Mm,
tree that was firmly planted. And it was by the ocean. You could overlook the ocean. And it's so interesting because even still, when I'm trying to calm or relax my body and just kind of maybe do a yoga nidra, but I'm not there yet, I will immediately go to that scene and I'll
you
sit
still
under
will
this
connect to it.
tree and I will just feel like that grounding energy pulling me down and just
Mm,
relaxing my body. And then that's it.
I
So
love that.
there is a lot of power in those metaphors. And so that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing
Oh,
that
my
with us.
pleasure.
Yes, please.
So, for our listeners that want this MP3 of the waterfall hypnotherapy session that Linda just spoke about, you can contact us on our website at changedbyfire.org, or you can even message us on Instagram, Changed by Fire, or even Facebook. And I will get your email address and get that sent over to you. So, that is amazing. So, if you want to learn more about Change by Fire, you can also visit our website. Like I said, changebyfire.org. You can learn a little bit about our mission. And really, our mission is to help burn survivors and their families heal from the emotional, psychological, and social trauma of their injury utilizing alternative healing modalities. We believe that it is complementary with other modalities, but we are here to help support you and guide you along the way. Also, I just wanted to share the Arizona Walk of Courage is coming up in just a couple weeks. And so, if you want to join us, you can join us either in person in Peoria, Arizona, or you can join us virtually all across the country and be a part of the 5th annual Arizona Walk of Courage. If you want to take advantage of any of the supports that we provide that are listed on our website, feel free to reach out to us. There is a questionnaire, and we'd be happy to help support you in your healing journey.
So until next time, I'm going to encourage you to heal. Have a go at hypnotherapy or any of the other alternative therapies that we've spoken about. Empower and engage your heart and your mind forward. Allow for that sense of healing and hope to spring within you and live that whole self that you each can be. See you next time.